We have before us Ms. Jaimie Tincher, Chief of Staff for the Governor's Office, and Amanda Simpson, if you guys want to come to the table and provide your budget presentation. Welcome to the committee. If you can please state your name for the record and who you represent.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to present information about the Governor's Office budget. I have brief background information to provide to the committee, and then I'd be glad to answer any questions. My name is Jaimie Tincher. I serve as Chief of Staff to Governor Mark Dayton and Lieutenant Governor Smith. With me today is Amanda Simpson, Director of Operations for the Office of the Governor and Lieutenant Governor. Amanda has served the Governor's Office for more than 10 years under 2 administrations. She served previously as the manager of the Governor's residence. The Office of the Governor and Lieutenant Governor serves all Minnesotans. Our entire team is focused on fulfilling the Governor and Lieutenant Governor's commitment to building a better Minnesota. The work of the Governor and Lieutenant Governor includes managing the day-to-day operations of state government, an organization of more than 30,000 employees, providing a multitude of critical services for the people of Minnesota. Our office provides oversight for 24 cabinet-level departments and 59 non-cabinet-level executive agencies, fills judicial vacancies, and appoints more than 1,300 Minnesotans to about 140 boards and commissions. The Governor serves as chair of the State Executive Council, the State Board of Investment, the Land Exchange Board, and the Board of Pardons. He is Commander-in-Chief of the Minnesota National Guard and oversees emergency response for the state. And as you know, he develops biennial budgets and policy recommendations for consideration in the legislature. The structure and operation of our office is designed to best serve Governor Dayton as he makes decisions and carries out his responsibilities as Chief Executive of the state. Reporting to me, but with direct access to the Governor and Lieutenant Governor, is a core team of senior managers responsible for the functions of the Governor's office, including policy development, legal counsel, legislative relations, communications, appointments, scheduling, intergovernmental relations, emergency management and homeland security, and administrative support. Every day, the Governor and Lieutenant Governor are guided by their commitment to improving the lives of all Minnesotans. We've built a team that works together and with department and agency heads, always with the goal of making state government more accessible and responsive to the people of Minnesota. Staff costs are the largest portion of our operating budget because our greatest asset is the talent and productivity of our people. It is critical that Governor Dayton and Lieutenant Governor Smith have a team of high-performing, high-caliber professionals, experts in their fields who are able to carry out the important responsibilities of this office. Additionally, the nature of the work demands flexible people who are skilled at responding quickly during times of crisis while still maintaining a consistent level of service to constituents that is both supportive and timely. The members of our policy team serve as liaisons with the state legislature and state executive branch agencies, act as ambassadors to the legislature and stakeholders on policy and legislative issues. They coordinate the development of the governor's legislative agenda, monitor bills and proposals moving at the legislature, conduct research, and provide briefings to the governor and lieutenant governor. Our communications team is the point of contact for the media, and they support the governor and lieutenant governor in communicating their priorities and positions to the people of this state. Our office deals with varied, complex, and numerous legal issues. Some relate to formal responsibilities of the office, such as making appointments to the state judicial branch, deciding whether to grant pardons, and preparing the state to deal with emergency and crisis situations. Other legal issues are less predictable, and therefore it is essential our legal team is able to effectively address many diverse legal questions that arise. Our office receives a large volume of mail, email, telephone calls, and constituent visits. In general, these contacts fall into 4 major categories. First, urging the governor to take a specific position or seeking the governor's position on state legislation or other policy-related matters. Second, requesting the governor or lieutenant governor's participation in a meeting or event or seeking time on their calendars. Third, requesting the governor's assistance on an issue or help in obtaining services from state government. And 4, requesting recognition of special achievements or milestones by organizations and/or individual Minnesotans. Since 2011, Governor Dayton has filled 127 judicial vacancies, increasing racial and ethnic diversity in the judiciary by 83%. He has appointed 2,400 citizens to 140 boards and commissions, increasing diversity of appointees by 65%. For all appointments, we have a team that tracks expiring terms and vacancies, identifies and recruits candidates for vacant positions, verifies credentials, and coordinates the background check process on applicants. In April 2016, we created the position of Chief Inclusion Officer in the Governor's Office. In this role, James Burrows is overseeing the state of Minnesota's efforts to ensure that the state's workforce reflects the rich diversity of Minnesota by increasing economic opportunity for people of color, people with disabilities, veterans, and others who are underrepresented in our workforce, increasing state contracting opportunities for racially diverse businesses, and increasing the state's civic engagement and partnerships with communities of color and other diverse communities. 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, the Office of the Governor and Lieutenant Governor works to provide the highest quality service to the people of Minnesota. That is the standard of excellence that Governor Dayton and Lieutenant Governor Smith have set for all of us and for all of state government. Our staff is extremely dedicated. We are increasingly proud of the work that we do to create a better Minnesota. We are ready and committed to delivering the very best results for Minnesotans during the remaining 23 months of this administration. With that, Madam Chair and members of the committee, we look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Tincher. I've got Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One issue that I've been tracking is the diversity of the state's workforce, and to the extent that it reflects the state's workforce. Can you tell me where you're at with moving forward with the goals that have been set forward in terms of reaching some of that diversity?
Sure.
Ms. Tincher.
Madam Chair, Representative, the governor set out a number of goals in the area of racial and ethnic representation. He has set the goal that by the time that he leaves office, he would like the state's workforce to reflect the diversity of Minnesota. And so he set a goal for us to meet 20% by the time he leaves office. When he set that goal, we were at 8%. We are now at 11% in the state workforce. We also have goals around the disability community and reflecting and matching the available workforce. We have a lot of work to do. What we've seen in really focusing and being intentional around these efforts is that there is the recruitment piece, the making sure that job opportunities are communicated broadly and that people know what opportunities there are in state government for employment. There's also how we conduct the interview process, minimum qualifications, how we screen applicants. Are we being accessible and providing those opportunities? Are there barriers in that portion of the process that we should review and eliminate? The biggest portion of reaching our goals is going to be the retention piece. Do we have a respectful, inclusive workplace where people feel valued, where they feel like they can bring their whole self to work? That's in many ways the hardest piece and what will lead to our best success if we can really figure out how to tackle that piece.
Representative Johnson.
One last question having to do with state emergencies. I think back to the avian flu and that whole incident. What did the governor's office, what was their role in dealing with that type of statewide emergency that, put a lot of people in a difficult spot?
Ms. Tincher.
Madam Chair, Representative, avian flu and then any number of other emergencies are similar in sort of the governor's office response. So when we were very concerned about any potential of an Ebola crisis here in Minnesota or, monitoring, watching for Zika, anything like that, specifically to the avian flu crisis, our Department of Agriculture partnered immediately with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They had boots on the ground here in Minnesota, around Minnesota, doing any number of tracking cases to working hand in hand with farmers who were, or with turkey producers who were being devastated by this situation. And so we played a coordinating role. We had a staff member who was intricately involved in all of the discussions, making phone calls to the federal government, to any of our contacts there, making sure that we were coordinating our efforts, working with the legislature on any resources that were going to be needed, and really playing the role of cutting through and eliminating any sort of time gap that was going to happen because people were, how do we make a decision, how do we get some things moved along? And so we had a staff person who was dedicated to that the entire time.
No,
Representative
thank you,
John?
Madam Chair. That's fine.
Okay. Representative Vogel?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Curious, the Special Revenue Fund, could you explain what that is or how that works? It's on this summary sheet that you gave us.
Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Ms. Simpson?
Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Amanda Simpson. I'm the Director of Operations with the Governor's Office. The Special Revenue Fund was set aside in 2004 during the, it was set aside in,
Can you maybe speak in, there's like a fan that goes on and it's hard to hear, so I
Madam
apologize.
Chair, is that better?
That's better, thank you.
Thank you. The Special Revenue Fund was set aside in 2004 during the Pawlenty administration for the interagency agreements between the Governor's Office and our different agencies. The Special Revenue Fund is used to fund salary positions in specific departments like our legal, constituent service, policy, and communications teams, as well as our diversity and inclusion office.
Representative Vogel?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I noticed that it's increased significantly from 2012, where it was 685,000 up to $1,363,000 projected in 17. And I'm just curious, and plus the expenditures, we've added 5.5 full times in those few years. Just curious what they've been doing or what the cause of that might be.
Ms. Simpson?
Madam Chair, Representative, we have seen growth in all of those departments, as well as the creation of the inclusion department. Sorry. So that is correct.
Representative Vogel?
So, Madam Chair, well, I guess the concern I might have is that each one of the department's budgets that are contributing the extra, $500,000 now, that's going into their operating expense, so I suppose it makes them much more difficult then to budget themselves because they're paying a higher assessment. So I don't, there's probably not a question there, but more of a comment that it's good that you're doing this stuff, but it also probably is making it a little more difficult on a lot of the agencies because they're paying a higher assessment, right?
Ms. Simpson? Ms. Tincher?
I would say that, as I said in the opening remarks, the coordination between our office and each of our agencies is critical. And so their ability to have someone that is liaisoning directly with the governor, communicating things back, operationally, there's just so much efficiency that is created by the positions in our office that are directly working with our agencies. So I believe the agencies see a lot of value in the staff that is dedicated to their needs.
Representative Vogel?
Thank you. I guess we'll just have to trust that they are.
I think for my purposes, it would be helpful for me to know, with the increase that they've had, what has that money gone toward specifically? I mean, this is, on this spreadsheet, it's pretty generic, so if you can provide more of those details. And then, Ms. Simpson, do you remember what was the amount in 2004 when it was first opened?
Madam Chair, I do not have that amount with me. I can definitely get that for
Would you? That would be great.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Representative Nash?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Tincher, question for you. I see in the recommended, in the big budget book, the governor has asked for 1819 46.7 FTEs in the office. Your 14 numbers were 38.7. Can you tell us that's an increase of 8 FTEs? What are those going for? And help us understand that, if you would.
Ms. Tincher?
Madam Chair, Representative, so in designing the office, every year there are new things that I look at. You know, when in my opening comments, I talked about our legal staff, our policy staff. creating the inclusion office. So I don't know that it's a one-for-one from, that time to current. Really what I'm looking at every day is how are we best serving the needs of the governor and lieutenant governor, and there are issues that whether it's rail safety, the focus on water, early education, there are departments that on a year-to-year basis, they may grow in one area because we're responding to a certain need. So some of that growth may be additional policy staff that weren't necessarily there. I know that we've expanded our legal team. So I would have to go back and look at, exactly which areas.
And Representative Nash?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, 8 FTEs is a pretty sizable increase, and I don't know what the increase over time was when the governor first came into office. I wasn't serving the legislature then. But, certainly over the 14-15 biennium, that's a pretty sizable jump. And I know you just put this together, so if you could maybe kind of give us some ideas, or if you wouldn't mind getting us that information after the fact, I'm sure the entire committee would really appreciate knowing what 8 FTEs are going for. And I know you can't say, well, this person over here is for this specific thing, and I'm sure you kind of share parts of FTEs. As I've learned here, we have
Right.
as little as 0.3 of an FTE for a certain area. But if you could, maybe just get us some of that breakdown so that we can share that with the committee, so that as we're moving forward on the budget, we can understand what those 8 FTEs are for.
Absolutely.
And Ms. Tincher, why an expansion on the legal team when the AG is our representative for that?
So I can give some detail on sort of the amount of legal work that we do, extraditions, things that are specific to our office. Our legal team also handles all of our data practices. There's just a substantial amount of work that happens in that team. And what I was going to expand on is, when I look at the office, I am always trying to figure out how can we be more responsive, faster, more efficient, respond to the things that Minnesotans are, asking us to provide service on. And so when I look at our constituent outreach office, there are thousands of requests that come in, and a lot of that is casework for Minnesotans. And so anytime that I'm going to have an ability to add staff so that we are answering phones, answering emails, getting things resolved for Minnesotans faster, that's what we're going to do. And so what I would say is that expansion in the staff, wherever we can figure out how we can add to our team so that we are more effective in responding quickly to Minnesotans, we're going to find a way to do that.
Representative Nash?
Well, and thank you, Madam Chair. And could you tell me what your average FTE compensation is? What are they getting paid?
Ms. Tincher?
Madam Chair, Representative Amanda, do you know? We can follow up with you. I don't know what the
I'm sorry, I couldn't
average.
hear you over.
I'm not sure if we have the average at this point.
Ms.
Madam
Simpson?
Chair, members of the committee, I will be happy to prepare that for you.
Yeah, if you could. Again,
Representative Nash?
thank you, Madam Chair, sorry. We're working on the budgets, and we've received this not that long ago, and it would be great to know what these new FTEs, what their wage is going to be, and benefit blending and all that. So just because it stuck out in my mind when I was reading last night for today, and I just thought, gosh, that's a lot. I'm a small business owner, and I make decisions very judiciously as to when to add staff, and this just seems like a huge jump.
Representative Vogel to this point?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Just one, relative to your questions on providing some detail, I just looked at this, and going up from 685, it went up 678,000, so it's basically been a 100% increase since 2012 in those special revenues. So as much detail there as possible would be nice, just to see how that's being spent, because I think it could become a hardship on a lot of the agencies. Thank you.
Representative Olson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I liked hearing about the piece where you're doing more engagement with communities of color, you're doing more work on that, and I imagine to some of the point when we're talking about FTEs and we're talking about being more intentional about who we engage marginalized voices, you speak a bit about your civic engagement efforts, and can you talk a little bit about some constituent service or some engagement you've done with marginalized communities in new and creative ways with this administration?
Ms. Tincher?
Madam Chair, Representative, Yes, a good example is in our appointments team. So what we realized was with the appointments process, there's the announcement of, appointments that are available. It was a very passive process, I think, in the past, where if you knew where to look for appointments to boards and commissions and things that were available, you would go to that website, you would apply. What we've done in our appointments team is they host information sessions. They do a lot of outreach and networking events so that we are getting into communities and talking with community leaders about who would be good folks for us to recruit to see if they would be interested in serving on boards and commissions. As you all know, the boards and commissions, whether they are small and very focused on things like food safety or, high-profile boards and commissions, they're really important to the functioning of Minnesota, to the safety and security and licensing processes that happen in Minnesota, and doubling down and being very intentional about making sure that we are looking for all of those voices and those communities to be involved in that process is really important to the governor and lieutenant governor.
Representative Olson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess to follow that up a bit, you talked about the accessible and responsive on constituent issues. Could you give an example of what that looks like as well, too, please?
Ms. Tincher?
Madam Chair, Representative, I can. A lot of our constituent services, we get thousands of calls, and a lot of the calls have to do with constituents needing help and support around human services, benefits that they need, health care, child protection issues. A lot of those calls end up being what we call casework, where someone in our office is walking through and managing a process and trying to get help and support for a Minnesotan, much like what you do in your offices for your constituents. One case that I'm particularly proud of that we worked on, there was a gentleman and his wife who lost their home because of a mudslide, and they didn't have, exactly the right insurance, and we stayed on it, and it took us more than a year, but we actually got resources to that family to cover that loss. That I believe without the work of the governor's office, that wouldn't have happened for that Minnesotan, and I could go on and tell you stories of where we're just helping everyday Minnesotans.
Representative Olson? Representative Flanagan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So along those lines, Ms. Tincher, regarding constituent services, sort of connected also to being more intentional in your work across racial equity and equity sort of overall, I was pleased to see the governor's office make some real progress as we've been talking about the work that the governor has done with tribes. I think has been done well. And there was a real, I think, need and to have more intentional relationships with our significant urban Indian populations in sort of both the Twin Minneapolis and St. Paul. So I was pleased to see some of that reflected in the budget that the governor proposed of that investment. Can you talk a little bit about how, for us, much of that starts with a conversation maybe with someone in the governor's staff, connecting them to community. But could you talk a little bit about how that's sort of been embraced overall? I know the governor has set the tone in a way that I think we haven't seen before from a governor in the state regarding the need for equity and inclusion. But how is that embraced by the rest of the governor's office and team? Because he can talk about it all day long, but unless the rest of the folks sort of buy into it, it doesn't matter. So we've seen that reflected in my own community, but I'm wondering what that looks like in other communities and areas.
Ms. Tincher?
Madam Chair, Representative, I would say it's fully embraced by the governor's staff, and we talk a lot about it in whatever issue it is, particularly in coordinating and bringing together the governor's budget recommendations. I think about the governor's senior team, and what is important to me in my role and in serving the governor and the lieutenant governor well is that I have tried to be intentional about putting around that senior table people who don't necessarily bring the same experiences or see the world the way that I do. I think that I better serve him when those other voices are there. The other thing I would say is that we've been very intentional as a cabinet in our monthly cabinet meetings, the heads of all of the agencies, we are very intentional and talk very specifically about what we're doing in each of our agencies around equity and inclusion, and how, as the heads of those agencies, the commissioners are very critically involved in advancing all of the work that we're doing around hiring, contracting, and really critically the engaging in community around policies, procedures, programs. How are we designing and developing all of the services that are provided to Minnesotans? And if we aren't asking those critical questions about how things are happening in community, and are we designing things the way that they are best going to get us the outcomes that we're looking for, we're missing really critical voices. So it's something that has been embraced throughout the administration.
Representative Flanagan?
Madam Chair, so as we're talking about these additional FTEs or these additional investment, do you believe it's been worth the investment for the outcomes that you've seen so far?
Ms. Tincher?
Madam Chair, Representative, absolutely. And I think that we're going to see the increased success of those investments. I think that the work that our equity office, our inclusion office is doing through the work of Mr. James Burrows, and his philosophy is that he is sort of a coach around how do you partner and really work with the agencies on meeting the goals that we have around representing the state of Minnesota, all of our communities, and the rich diversity that we have. We also have someone in his office who brings a lot of state government experience, and her focus is career pathways in state government, and how are we designing and really thinking about career opportunities and being inclusive around those career opportunities for all of our communities. So,
Representative Flanagan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm done.
Representative Quam?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I think this would probably be for Ms. Tincher. Some correspondence dated February 13th to the chair in response to some questions. I don't think in my packet I've got the complete response, so if there'd be a way to be able to get that additional supplemental information, since it was, I think, meant to be available before, would be nice. But glancing at what is available, there's a summary history FTE, and it appears to be by bargaining unit. And building off on another question, under here there's MAPE with 0.04. I'm trying, because I was on a school board, and we had trouble filling, a 0.4 or a 0.3 position. If there's an explanation offline, but I don't know how you get a person for 19 minutes a day, an hour and a half a week, or 80 hours a year. And it'd be nice to understand if they're sharing between different organizations, that might help us understand, the general budget when we see these small fractional. But just, clarification there. I did want to, and I apologize, I'm being selfish, because you talked about the helping a person. There was a mudslide or something. If you can get me the information, I was at an event in Rochester. I don't know if this lady's a constituent or not, but her doctor told her that her life-saving procedure that she would need isn't covered by the insurance. They tried an exemption, et cetera. It used to be in the previous insurance. We all know this is a complex, but unfortunately not a individual. So if you could get that information to me, and I can pass that on, because we're all here to help people. Thank you.
Ms. Tincher, do you have any follow-up?
Madam Chair, Representative, if you want, I would be happy to get the constituents' information and follow up with you and see if there's anything we can do to help with that. And then I do know, yes, I will follow up. And then I know that Ms. Simpson can answer your question on the MAPE piece.
Ms. Simpson?
Madam Chair, Representative, we receive assistance from SMART, the Small Agency Resource Team, and they bill through payroll, and the 2 employees that work with us are representatives represented by the MAPE and MMA. So what you're seeing is the percentage of work they do for us as billed through our payroll. Thank you.
Representative Quam?
No, that takes care of it. Thank you.
Okay. Representative Detmer?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and this question is for Ms. Tincher. I'm looking at the small agency profile here, and then there is one bullet point that I'm attracted to. I chair the Veterans Committee, the division, which falls underneath this committee. And as we know, the governor is the commander-in-chief of our armed forces, the National Guard and Air National Guard. And how does could you explain to the committee here how he's engaged with these 2 organizations, the TAG and also the Veterans Affairs with Commissioner Shelito, and then the TAG is General Nash. How does he relate and how does he work with these 2 organizations? And do they meet regularly, especially when they're looking at their budgets and so forth? So.
Ms. Tincher?
Madam Chair, Representative, yes, he did. The governor met with General Nash and with General Shelito on both of those budgets as he meets with cabinet heads. And then on an as-needed basis, he meets with General Nash and General Shelito to get briefings, updates. If things are happening in their agencies, they typically will call me, and then we get something set up, and they get time with the governor.
Representative Detmer?
Yeah, Madam Chair, and does the governor, does he get the information to these organizations in a timely manner when it comes to budgeting? Because many times the different committees, and in terms of this committee, many times we have targets that we have to meet, and what happens sometimes when I know last year we had a problem with one of the departments and the agencies, and they came in with short money. How does the governor deal with that? Because he is the commander-in-chief. So,
Ms. Tincher?
Madam Chair, Representative, I think that I know the issue that you're mentioning. I think what happened with, so my experience with an issue, and I think this might be the issue you're talking about, there was a fundamental misunderstanding of what was going on in the Department of Veterans Affairs budget. And so they have a funding revenue stream that is unique. So they have revenue that comes in, and then they have their general fund, and then they have their federal funds. And so when they were making a request, it was unclear that they needed to make up for a loss of revenue to their homes. And so it appeared at first glance that they were asking for a far bigger increase than what all of the other agencies were asking for. But it was a misunderstanding on the fact that we needed to make up some revenue that was lost from a funding stream that happened. So once General Shelito and his staff and I sat down and we went through that, and once I understood what was going on, we corrected for that. And so it may be that lag in time was that we had some just miscommunication on what was going on at the beginning.
Representative Detmer?
Madam Chair, and so what we're probably saying is that something like that is not going to happen again. What precautions can you take so that things like this don't happen, especially at the end of the session almost?
Ms. Tincher?
Madam Chair, Representative, I was thinking about this in response to the growth in FTEs and another question, but what I will say is that the efficiencies and our capacity to just be better at our jobs is oftentimes just a result of being in that job and experiencing things. So every day I learn more and more about state government, and while I can't say that we will prevent that, every day I try to be a little bit better about knowing something I didn't know the day before and responding better. So while I can't say that we will prevent a misunderstanding, we will work to correct it as quickly as possible. And I will say that it's important to me that all of the cabinet heads have direct access to me. One of the things that I've done in terms of my schedule is I try to keep windows of every day open so that things that arise and that I can help deal with them immediately. So cabinet members typically have that priority in terms of at least getting to me so that I can get to the governor when they need things.
Thank you. Thank you.
Representative Uglum?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of questions. Madam Tincher, on your spreadsheets here on the special revenue funds, asking for a little more detail here. You have your transfers in, and you have it coded, and of course, the amounts. For instance, there's one for $247,000, but we don't know where that's coming from. You just have code numbers on that. Would it be possible for us to get the detail on that, so we could see that?
Ms. Simpson?
Madam Chair, Representative, I'd be happy to prepare the spreadsheet with the specific agencies for you.
Thank you. I have one other question.
Representative Uglum?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know that we used to have an office in Washington, D.C. I was looking through the spreadsheets. I didn't see that cost there. Do we still have that D.C. office?
Ms. Simpson?
Madam Chair, Representative, no, we no longer have representation in DC.
Representative Uglum?
So how does that work in terms of the agencies? Are they still, I couldn't see that detail either. They're not still being charged for the support of that, are they?
Ms. Simpson?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, the work that was done by the DC office is now done by our policy advisors within our office.
Okay. Madam Chair?
Representative Uglum?
So then those costs and everything else are still being incurred then?
Ms. Simpson? Or Ms. Tincher?
Excuse me, Madam Chair, Representative, we're no longer charging for rent the way that we were for the DC office, but the staff cost and the time are now being absorbed by the governor's office.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I apologize. So I missed that part because we've had different agencies that have come in that have listed it as for the federal office. So is that just for staff time, or what is that when they list that as their transfer out?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I'm not aware of why they're listing it as the federal office.
Okay, we'll maybe have to have a conversation with you then at some point here. Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Tincher or Ms. Simpson, I was thinking through the question that I had asked a little bit ago, and I think you had mentioned that you had brought some new employees in to handle appointments. And my question was, how many appointments have been made, and how many employees do you require to make an appointment? So kind of what's the ratio of appointments to employee? Go ahead, I'll do vice chair stuff. Ms. Tincher.
Madam Chair, Representative, so since 2011, there have been 127 judicial vacancies that have been filled, 2,400 citizens appointed to boards and commissions, and I'll have to check with that because that may be reappointments embedded in that. So, and the way that we have it structured, we have a director over the department, and then we have 2 individuals who work in that department under that person. And typically, we focus on judicial appointments with that supervisor and 1 staff person, and then all other boards and commissions with the other staff person. And so in all of those, there's a lot of timelines that have to be met, vacancies when they become open, the background check process. With the judicial appointments, there is a judicial commission. So there's just a lot of logistical pieces that those staff really make sure that we're meeting those timelines and deadlines.
Sure. And Madam Chair.
Representative Nash.
And I want to make sure that my question was clear. You said that the 8 new employees that are being are in the budget, that there's some appointment personnel that are being added, and that you've added personnel for that function over time. I'm just trying to figure out, so you've got a director and 2 people in that office, and then so if that's the case, are you expecting more appointments in the last couple of years, or what is the approach there? I'm just curious.
Ms. Tincher?
Madam Chair, Representative. So my approach to the office, I don't really think about it as so much departments in silos. And so the judicial vacancies, there is a logistical operational piece, so the paperwork, the background checks, the getting the governor scheduled so that he can do the interviews for the judicial appointees. There's those pieces of it, but our legal team also is a part of that process as well. So we have our general counsel who sits in on interviews. So there is work to fill a judicial appointment, to fill boards and commissions where some of that work we do with the policy team. So they may get a question, we have this board or this commission, are there some folks that we could reach out to? So a lot of the work in the governor's office is very flexible between the departments. And so from 2011 to now, it would be hard for me I don't know that it's linear in terms of, if we have 8 more FTEs than we did then, it would be hard to go back and sort of recreate, where did that, what specific event sort of created that. It's just a general need, and how do we fill those needs in the office?
Representative Nash?
Thanks, Madam Chair. And Ms. Tincher, I'm sure from an accounting perspective, maybe this is better for Ms. Simpson. You're saying, okay, so we'll just talk about the generic Bob. Bob works in your office, and today Bob's got X number of, not you, Bob, but, so X number of hours are being directed towards this activity, and then X number of hours the next day. Is that how you're viewing this? You said that they're sort of amorphous and they're kind of working on different projects. Did I hear that right, or is it actual employees that work on the appointment process? Because I'm kind of figuring out, is it that you charge back certain or account for X number of hours of a person's time? Today they're doing appointments, tomorrow they're doing something else.
Right.
And maybe that's part of the information you can get us about these other employees is how do you look at their work as it relates to the appointment process?
Ms. Tincher?
Madam Chair, Representative, maybe a good example would be, I just believe that we shouldn't work in silos. And so in the governor's office, we are just much better at serving the needs of the people of Minnesota if there is a lot of cross collaboration, that people are communicating and collaborating on whatever task it is that we have to do. And so different people bring expertise or some support. One of the changes that we've made in the office, previous to adding the Chief Inclusion Officer position, there was a position that was just a Deputy Chief of Staff. And that was really a person that I would say sat beside me, did all of the sort of overflow and helped and supported the Chief of Staff. I eliminated that role basically because we knew that we needed to add the capacity and add that expertise and that function of a Chief Inclusion Officer that was looking at what we were doing across the administration. So a lot of the functions, it's about figuring out, well, what is the need that we have? What is the thing that the governor and lieutenant governor want our office to be able to respond to? And then I look at the office structure and organization and the budget, and there are things that sometimes we will eliminate a certain role or that will get absorbed into the functions that a number of people will do.
Representative Nash?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you no longer have a Deputy Chief of Staff, is that right?
Ms. Tincher?
Madam Chair, Representative, there are deputies over specific departments. Prior to the Chief Inclusion Officer role, there was a person who was just a Deputy Chief of Staff, so was my number 2.
And Madam Chair, was that
Representative
Mr.
Nash.
Zakula, or did I say that right?
Ms. Tincher?
Madam Chair, Representative, it was Dana Bailey and then Shantara Hardy
Representative Nash?
Okay.
in different roles.
You know what, maybe,
Yep.
Madam Chair, if we could, this is, you see where I'm going with this line of questioning. If you could maybe help me understand the increased employees, what they're doing, and how it is that they factor into these appointments, because you said that you're dealing with many more appointments, and that's why you brought some more of these people in. And I'm just trying to figure out, what that is.
Ms. Tincher, you'll communicate with them later?
Sure.
Thank you.
Representative Uglum?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Tishner, When you have your employees and then you're charging back the various departments and everything else, do you code their time? I applaud your idea of not having silos, okay? I understand that. But you're charging back various departments and agencies and things, and how do you know how much to charge them back? Are you coding their particular time and their duties during a project, for example, or something like that?
Ms. Tincher or Ms. Simpson?
Madam Chair, Representative, during the Palenti administration, the group created a formula based on the federal funds and the percentages of the size of each agency in order to create the percentages that we charge each agency. So we use the same percentages as the previous administration. We don't code specific work for employees, but we do look at the amount of work they do that's agency specific and then assign their salary to the special revenue fund or to the general fund.
Representative?
Madam Chair. Well, for instance, MnDOT uses a coding system, and it seems to be pretty accurate in things. And my question to you is, a formula that was put into place many, many years ago, how comfortable are you with the accuracy of that formula, especially with the changing needs that your group, your department, the executive branch has had to deal with over the last number of years? It seems to me that there should be some review on that.
Ms. Simpson?
Madam Chair, Representative, we could definitely look at reviewing the formula that we use. We do review the positions and the work they do for agencies, and the Chief of Staff and I regularly discuss weekly our budget and how we're assigning our employees.
Okay.
Representative? I've got a couple of questions. I'm looking at the FTE piece of it. Does this reflect all of the FTEs, or when you talk about the folks that you have embedded in the different agencies, are they reflected in this FTE count? Ms. Simpson or Ms. Tincher?
Madam Chair, embedded in the agencies, I'm not
Well, you talked
following your question.
Yeah, I'm asking because you mentioned a little bit that some of the folks you kind of have, like the legal team you maybe have within an agency. So are they counted under the agency, or are they counted under the governor's office? So are there any people that are responsible to the governor's office, but they're counted under a different agency rather than the FTEs of the governor's office? Does that make sense?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, we do have some people in our office that work for other agencies but are housed in our agency. We provide the space and the technology support for other employees from other agencies.
Okay. But they're not under your FTE then at all?
Madam Chair, correct. They are not listed under FTEs as they are not employees of the governor's office.
Can you provide me with a list of that?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then this is for Ms. Tincher. Well, actually, this goes back to Ms. Simpson, too. I got some clarification. So when the agencies have been coming before us that are under our purview, it's not federal office. They've been listing it as federal affairs for the chargebacks that they're doing. So can you give me more details about those chargebacks for the federal affairs pieces for each of the agencies that have come before us? So they have in the budget piece, they list it as to the governor's office for federal affairs, and I'm more interested in what exactly does that go for? Do you understand what I'm asking? Ms.
Madam
Simpson?
Chair, I believe that is a relic from how they used to charge for the governor's office when there was an office in DC, so I believe they haven't changed their coding.
Okay.
That would be my best understanding of that.
Well, then for those pieces that if their coding reflects that, can you give us an idea of what that is? Then what that money is, because the money's still coming to you, so it'd be, if it's not that federal affairs piece, I'd like to know what is the money actually for, so.
And Madam Chair, I will say that we still do in our office a fair amount of work with our federal delegation, with the administration in DC. So a lot of our agencies will come to our office, and either through the governor, the lieutenant governor, through our policy team, a lot of that federal-focused questions, letters, responses, things like that, it goes through our office. And so while we don't have a federal office that we are paying rent for, that function is still happening.
Okay. I think it would be helpful for me to have a better understanding of what that is. So if you can provide that information.
Yes, ma'am.
And then I do have some questions. Earlier in the year, I had sent some letters to Ms. Tincher, just asking about the whole severance deal. And I'm just curious, so we've seen a jump of 100% in the governor's office chargebacks. Did the severance package piece to the 3 employees, is that what resulted in the increase by 100% in the chargebacks? Ms. Tincher?
Madam Chair, no.
Okay, so where would we find that in the budget?
Madam Chair, I'm not following. Where would we find what?
So for each of the severance packages that the governor issued to the 3 different employees, Commissioner Sieben, Clark, and I think it was Commissioner Wright, if I have it correct. I'll have to take a look at the names again. Where did that money come from to pay for their severance packages?
Madam Chair, so I would have to look at their budgets, but that would have come from their operating compensation budgets.
So would it have come out of their agency budgets, is what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. All right. And then does the governor have a policy in place now on the severance piece of things, of when he'll give it out? Does he give it out for involuntary leave or voluntary leave, or has he established that policy in place now? Or
So, Madam Chair, Amanda can speak to our office severance package, but the severance packages that you're referring to, that's laid out in statute. So when those arose, I reached out to the HR and legal professionals at the Department of Management and Budget. They laid out, here were the options, and in each of those cases, the governor made a decision on the, I believe it was 2 months, 3 months, and 3 months of severance package. He was authorized up to 6 months, and so he made that determination within those parameters as laid out by statute, was my understanding.
well, Ms. Tincher, when I look at that, so you're saying that the administration has no written policy on it at all. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, the administration followed what was laid out in statute as what was applicable.
Well, there's been disagreement on the interpretation of the statute piece. And I'm just curious, the governor there's no salary-based severance provision included in the administration's managerial plan proposal to the legislature. Is that something that the governor is going to seek here in the future, or no?
I'm not following, Madam Chair, I'm not following the question.
Well, under our current, we don't have any salary-based severance provision included in the administration's managerial plan proposal to the legislature. Is the governor going to change that, given the conversation around severance packages, or not?
So, Madam Chair, maybe it's helpful. I mean, in our plan, we have a procedure for severance packages. I think that is what every agency, whether it's the managerial plan, whatever your compensation plan is, there are provisions for when there is a retirement, whatever sort of a termination of service. So I'm not clear. I mean, we could go through what the governor's office severance policy is as outlined in our compensation plan.
But does the governor have a policy, a written policy within his office that says when a severance package is going to be offered? Because we had some folks that left and were not provided a severance package. So I'm guessing that he has to have something in place that says when that happens, and what would that be?
Madam Chair, so we have a policy that governs our employees in the governor's office. We'd be happy to talk about that. For the 3 instances that you're bringing up, again, I went to the Department of Management and Budget, as laid out in statute. They told us, here is what, here are the options that are available, and the governor made a decision about those pieces. So there is no written policy outside of what the statutory language provides.
And so there's no plan in place of when you offer a benefits package at all? Is that left up to the discretion of the governor?
My understanding is that is what is in statute, is that it is at the discretion of the governor. That's my understanding. So we don't have any other policy.
Okay, Representative Vogel.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and possibly to Ms. Simpson, just one more question on the transfer thing. I noticed that back in 2014, there was a transfer out for a rather small amount for a statewide executive recruiter, but now that's grown to $10,000 in 2016 and $20,000 in 17. I'm just curious what the statewide executive recruiter is.
Ms. Tincher or Ms. Simpson?
Madam Chair, Representative, one of the first things that we did around looking at how are we going to meet the goals of diversifying our workforce is we wanted to be very intentional and focused on the top level of government. We knew that if we could focus on those top level positions and really diversify in that, in those top positions, we would have people in decision-making positions that were going to help us with a lot of the additional work that we were going to do, so that for all 30,000 plus employees, we were going to be able to meet those goals. And so in looking at how we hire in state government, it became very clear that for top-level positions, you needed to know that those positions were available, and much the same way that the private sector employs recruiting and really looking for and going out and finding top-level management and top-level talent, we needed to do that. And so the state created a statewide executive recruiter position so that we were being very intentional about when we had openings, that person works directly with the cabinet heads, our commissioners, our deputy commissioners, talks to them about what are you looking for, and then goes and creates a network of high-level professionals in the state of Minnesota that would potentially either now for that position or in the future would be interested in joining the ranks of state government. And we have found that it's been immensely successful in the, I would have to look at the numbers, but since that position has been brought on, of the new hires that we've made just in that cohort of top-level management, I believe that it was, at last count, 1 in 4 of those new hires are from underrepresented communities.
Representative Vogel?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a follow-up then, so is the $20,000 that's going to the governor's office the entire amount, or are there other agencies that are contributing?
Ms. Tincher?
Madam Chair, Representative, all of the cabinet level agencies contribute a portion of that. The governor's office portion is a higher percentage than the size of our agency. So when we do the pro rata share, we contributed more because it was a position that we very much believed needed to be funded. And so we took on a little bit more of that cost so as to keep those costs down for the other agencies.
Representative Vogel?
Madam Chair, and so how much is the total, do you know, that's being allocated overall?
Ms. Tincher?
Madam Chair, Representative, we can get that to you.
Representative Vogel?
Just one final question on it then. Is that expected to keep growing kind of as exponentially as it has? It went from 0 to 10,000 to 20,000. Are you projecting kind of a straight line growth, or do you see that leveling?
Ms. Tincher?
Madam Chair, Representative, I see that leveling. I think we probably took on additional, so that is probably not reflective of what has happened in the other agencies. We probably took on more.
Thank you.
Okay. Representative Olson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Ms. Tincher. And this is actually to what Representative Vogel is bringing up. I'm from Greater Minnesota, and I think having representation in, the executive branch from Greater Minnesota from diverse communities is really important. And we can't often leave it up to communities that are often underrepresented to find out what's going on or see. We have to be active with it. So I imagine there's an element of investing in this so that we have representation from Greater Minnesota, we have representation from diverse communities. So I just want to highlight that, some numbers that we have, that you've increased racial diversity in the judicial branch by 83%. There's been folks increased diversity with 65% on boards and commissions, that you've maintained equal representation and with voices from Greater Minnesota, and in some places actually increased that. So I just want to that point, just highlight the connection between those two. There has to be a correlation, and if, just continuing to explain a little bit more directly about that correlation is helpful.
Ms. Tincher?
Madam Chair, Representative, that's accurate. So as we have increased racial, ethnic diversity, there has also been an intentional focus on Greater Minnesota. And I will tell you, whenever I'm in the meetings on judicial appointments, boards and commissions, one of the things that the governor looks at when we provide, here are the applicants, here are the recommendations that people have received, the governor always goes back and says, well, what would be the composition? How many people from where in our state? What would this board look like? And representation from Greater Minnesota is always key for him.
Representative Olson? Members, any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Tincher, Ms. Simpson. We look forward to the information.